This is a section from near the beginning of Even Dogs in the Wild. The patrol car sat curbside with its roof lights flashing. It was a wide street of detached, late Victorian houses. The gates to Cafferty's driveway were open and a white van was parked there. A couple of neighbours had come out to spectate. They looked cold and would probably head in again soon. The two uniformed officers, one male, one female, were known to Siobhan Clark. She introduced Malcolm Fox, then asked what had happened. Neighbour across the way heard a bang and a flash too, then glass shattering. They went to the window but couldn't see any sign of life. The living room lights went off, but they could see the window was smashed. Curtains were open, she says. He's been quick enough getting a glazier. Fox nodded towards Cafferty's house, where a man was busy fitting a plywood covering over the window. What does the occupant say? Clark asked the uniforms. He's not opening his door. Says it was an accident. Denies it was anything like a shot. And he told you this by shouting through the letterbox when we were trying to get him to let us in. You know who he is, right? He's Big Ger Cafferty, gangster sort of character. At least he used to be. Clark nodded slowly and noticed that a dog, some kind of terrier, was standing next to her and giving one of her legs an exploratory sniff. She shooed it, but it sat back on its haunches, staring up at her. Must belong to a neighbour, one of the uniforms surmised. It was padding up and down the pavement when we got here. He bent down to scratch the dog behind one ear. Check the rest of the street, Clark said. See if anyone saw anything. She headed up the path towards the front door, taking a detour to where the glazier was nailing the panelling into the window frame. Everything okay here? She asked him. As far as she could tell, the living room curtains were now closed, the room behind them in darkness. Just about finished. We're police officers. Can you tell us what happened? Accidental breakage. I've measured up. It'll be good as new tomorrow. You know, neighbours are saying a bullet did this. In Edinburgh? The man shook his head. You'll need to give your details to my colleagues before you leave. Fine by me. Have you done work for Mr. Cafferty before? The man shook his head again. But you know who he is. So it's not beyond the realms of fantasy that there was a gunshot of some kind. Tells me he tripped and fell against a pane. I've seen it happen plenty of times. I'm guessing, Fox interrupted, he made it worth your while to come out straight away. Says emergency on my van because that's what I do. Emergency repairs. Immediate response whenever possible. The man hammered the final nail into place and checked his handiwork. There was a toolbox on the ground next to him along with a portable workbench where he had sawn the plywood to size. The shards of glass had been swept up into a dustpan, larger pieces placed one on top of the other. Fox had crouched down to examine them, but when he stood up, the look he gave Clark told her he hadn't gleaned anything. She turned towards a solid-looking door, pressing the bell half a dozen times. When there was no response, she bent down and pushed open the letterbox. It's D.I. Clark, she called out. Siobhan Clark. Any chance of a word, Mr. Cafferty? Come back with a warrant, the voice from within yelled. She put her eyes to the letterbox and could see his shadowy bulk in the darkened hall. It's good you've turned the lights off, she said. Makes you less of a target. Do you reckon they'll come back? What are you on about? You been in a drink again? I hear you getting too fond of it. Clark could feel the blood rising to her cheeks. She managed to stop herself checking Fox's reaction. You could be endangering your neighbours' lives as well as your own. Please think about that. You're dreaming, woman. I knocked against the glass and it broke. End of. If it's a warrant you want, I can fetch one. Bugger off and do that then. Leave me in peace. She let the flap of the letterbox clack shut and straightened up, fixing her eyes on Fox. You reckon you've got something better than a warrant, don't you? He said. Go on then. He motioned towards the phone she was clutching in her right hand. Give Rebus a bell.